They say a good actor is the most convincing liar, but at the highest level, acting becomes the naked truth. These are the moments when the studio lights fade, the script vanishes, and all that remains before our eyes are human beings, living, suffering, and spiraling into madness. You no longer see movie stars, you only see torn souls. Today, Cameo Chronicles will dissect 10 performances that blurred the line between fiction and reality. Take a deep breath, because this list might just take yours away. Welcome to the top 10 breathtakingly immersive performances. Starting our acting masterclass list today, we step into a cramped, cold interrogation room at the Gotham City Police Department. This is the setting for the greatest psychological confrontation in superhero movie history: Batman versus the Joker. Usually in cinema, an interrogation scene follows a rule. The strong use force, and the weak succumb to fear and reveal the truth. Batman holds all the cards here. He possesses superior physical strength, body armor, and the backing of the law. He enters the room with the mindset of a hunter, ready to crush his prey to find Rachel and Harvey Dent. But what makes this scene a classic is how Heath Ledger receives that violence. Look closely. When Batman slams Joker's head into the metal table, thud. A painful impact. But Joker doesn't groan. He lifts his head and smiles. He flicks his hair back casually as if he just tripped. Christian Bale, as Batman, begins to land thunderous punches on his face. Joker is thrown against the wall, nose bleeding. But instead of begging, Heath Ledger lets out a cackling laugh. It isn't the laugh of mindless insanity, but the laugh of victory. Why is this the pinnacle of acting? Because Heath Ledger completely reversed the power dynamic. Through his darting eyes and signature lip-licking, he shows the audience that the Joker is enjoying this pain. He realizes Batman is desperate. The harder Batman hits, the more Joker knows he has won. The most breathtaking moment isn't when a punch is thrown, but when Joker looks straight at Batman, with his black makeup smeared, and whispers a line sharper than any knife. "You have nothing to do with all your strength." That line stripped the hero of his power. Heath Ledger isn't playing a captured criminal. He is playing a professor teaching Batman a brutal lesson about human nature, that his moral code is a bad joke and physical strength is useless against a mind that has nothing left to lose. The chemistry between Christian Bale and Heath Ledger here is perfect. One side is rage, screaming, trying to control the situation. The other is calm, mocking, body completely relaxed. Joker turns the interrogation room into his own stage. He makes Batman and the audience realize you cannot threaten a man who just wants to watch the world burn. And when the scene ends, Batman leaves and Joker sits there laughing alone in the dark. We shudder to realize he was the one in control the entire time. Leaving the criminal world of Gotham at number 9, we enter a battlefield more brutal than any other. The living room of a collapsing family. The film is Marriage Story. No CGI, no dramatic score, just Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. Why does this scene suffocate the viewer? Because it is too real. Director Noah Baumbach created a space where characters don't spar with witty comebacks like in typical movies. They argue like real human beings, messy, interrupting, and attacking the most fatal weaknesses of the other person. Look at the psychological shift of Adam Driver. At first, he tries to use logic to defend himself, but Scarlett Johansson, with absolute subtle acting, peels away every layer of his ego. She doesn't use violence, she uses the very intimate understanding of a wife to mock her husband's failures. And then, the monster appears. When Adam Driver screams, his voice cracks, his face turns red, veins bulging. He becomes massive, terrifying, dominating the frame. But the peak of this masterclass acting isn't in the scream. It lies in the regret. The exact moment he utters the most cruel line, "I wish you were dead, so I wouldn't have to see you anymore." He killed his own soul. Watch that moment closely. He feels no triumph. He collapses instantly. The punch to the wall isn't violence directed at his wife. It is punishment directed at himself. He falls to his knees, burying his face, sobbing like a lost child. That is the moment the male ego completely shatters before the pain of loss. And Scarlett Johansson's reaction? She is stunned. But then, the instinct of love rises. She doesn't walk away. She walks over, gently placing a hand on his shoulder, a touch full of forgiveness amidst the ashes of hurtful words. This scene deserves to be in acting textbooks because it proves a painful paradox. Only those who love us the most know exactly how to hurt us the most. A naked performance that stole tears from millions because everyone sees a part of themselves in it. At number 8, we leave the vast landscapes behind to enter a small, soundproof room, thick with the smell of sweat and fear. The film is Whiplash, and the nightmare is named Terrence Fletcher. J.K. Simmons took home a well-deserved Oscar for this role. Why? Because he proved a terrifying truth. A conductor's hand gesture can sometimes be more lethal than a loaded gun. Observe how the scene is established. Fletcher walks into the room. He doesn't scream immediately. He is gentle, adjusting his jacket, speaking in a warm, low tone. He even comforts Andrew, creating an illusion of empathy. He makes the prey believe he is in a safe environment. That is the trap. This silence isn't peace. It's the silence of a ticking time bomb. The moment the music starts, J.K. Simmons transforms. The instant the metal chair flies through the air and crashes into the wall. Crash! The entire room goes dead silent. That is the moment the movie switches genres, from a music film to psychological horror. But the peak of this acting masterclass lies in the interrogation sequence that follows. Fletcher slowly advances on Andrew. He is no longer a teacher. He is a predator toying with a wounded mouse. Look at J.K. Simmons' eyes. Wide open, unblinking, pupils dilated with mania, yet maintaining a deadly focus. He begins to slap Andrew's face. Slap, slap, slap. The most terrifying part is that he doesn't slap chaotically. He slaps on the beat. He turns the student's body into an instrument for him to control. He uses physical pain to teach rhythm. The iconic line rings out, "Not quite my tempo." J.K. Simmons gets right in Andrew's face, invading his personal space, spittle flying as he screams. He uses the most venomous words, insulting Andrew's family, insulting his dignity right in front of his peers. Why is this the pinnacle of acting? Because J.K. Simmons portrays two opposing states simultaneously, the loss of control of rage and the absolute control of a perfectionist. He knows exactly what he is doing. He believes this cruelty is necessary to forge a genius. He doesn't see himself as the villain. He sees himself as the only one brave enough to do what is necessary to save jazz. The contrast between an overpowering, explosive J.K. Simmons and a shrinking, tearful Miles Teller creates one of the most stressful scenes of the 21st century. Watching this, the audience doesn't just feel fear. We feel suffocated. Hearts race, palms sweat. J.K. Simmons drags us into the screen, sits us at that drum kit, and forces us to endure the crushing pressure of perfection. He created a villain who didn't need to kill to be a demon. He killed joy, killed confidence, and left a permanent psychological scar. A truly breathtaking performance. At number 7, we bow before the holy land of method acting. None other than Daniel Day-Lewis. If previous entries showed us humans in pain, here we witness a human who has lost all humanity. In the final scene at the private bowling alley, the character Daniel Plainview is no longer a dapper oil man. He is old, hunched, and rotten from the inside out. Look at how Daniel Day-Lewis moves. He doesn't walk like a normal person. He drags his feet, his body listing and swaying from alcohol and hatred. He has transformed his character into an old beast, hiding in its cave, waiting for the final prey to enter. And that prey is Eli Sunday. The terror of the acting here lies in the contempt. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't just hate Eli. He views Eli as a toy to play with before crushing. He breaks his opponent's faith, just for entertainment. But the peak of immersion lies in the most famous monologue of the 21st century, the milkshake, When Daniel explains how he drained Eli's oil, he doesn't use business terms. He uses imagery so childish it becomes horrifying. Listen to Daniel Day-Lewis's voice here. He growls, then pitches his voice high like a deranged clown. Da Renage! Eli, you boy, I drink your milkshake. I drink it up. Why is this scene so haunting? Because Daniel Day-Lewis portrayed greed in its most primal form. When he screams, spittle flies, eyes bulge, and veins in his neck stand out. He mimics the slurping sound. He shows us that he isn't just stealing property, he is drinking Eli's vitality, dignity, and life itself. The end of the scene is pure violence. Daniel throws bowling balls at Eli, chasing him like a cat chasing a mouse. No mercy, no hesitation, when he uses a bowling pin to crush Eli's head and sits panting on the floor next to a pool of blood. Daniel Day-Lewis utters the final line, "I'm finished." This line carries a terrifying weight. He is finished killing. But deeper than that, he is finished as a human being. He achieved his goal of becoming the richest, most powerful man, but also the loneliest on earth. He sold his soul to the devil, and now the transaction is complete. Daniel Day-Lewis wasn't acting. He allowed the monster of greed to possess his body for these final 10 minutes. A performance that is both disgusting and tragic, making the audience shudder at the destructive power of money. At number 6, prepare yourself to withstand a literal auditory assault. We leave the silence of closed rooms to enter hell on earth. The Paris Island Marine Corps Boot Camp. The film is Full Metal Jacket, and the nightmare is named Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Why did this role become a cultural icon? Because R. Lee Ermey wasn't playing a soldier. He was a real-life drill instructor. Director Stanley Kubrick, known for his extreme perfectionism, broke his own rules to let Ermey write and improvise up to 50% of his own lines, something unprecedented in Kubrick's history. The opening scene has no gunfire, no explosions, just a man walking around a room and screaming. But it is a continuous machine gun fire of words without a single pause. Listen to his rhythm. He doesn't just insult mindlessly. He turns insults into poetry, into a melody. He assigns nicknames, attacks the appearance, religion, and hometown of every recruit with brutal creativity. He moves with precision, his eyes sharp as razors, and a voice so steely it echoes in the audience's chest. The line, "I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor," is not an introduction, it is a declaration of ownership. From that moment on, the souls of these young men belong to him. The peak of this masterclass acting lies in the reaction of the supporting actors. The fear on the recruits' faces is real fear. They didn't know what Ermey would say next. They were completely overwhelmed by the terrifying energy radiating from this man. R. Lee Ermey proved that. Words are also a lethal weapon. He strips away the ego of each soldier, erasing their identity to turn them into killing machines. Watching this scene, the audience feels suffocated. Not out of fear for the characters' lives, but because we are crushed by absolute authority. We feel as if we even breathe too loudly, Sergeant Hartman will step out of the screen and punish us immediately. If at number 6, screaming was a tool to establish power, then at number 5, screaming is the expression of total collapse. We enter one of the most haunting scenes in modern horror history, the dinner scene in Hereditary. Toni Collette. Remember this name because she delivered a performance that was the most unjustly snubbed by the Oscars in the last decade. Why is this scene in the top 5? Because it breaks the Hollywood rule of beautiful grief. In typical movies, when a mother cries, she maintains an aesthetic appeal. A single tear rolls down, lighting perfectly soft. But not Toni Collette. She chose to portray grief in its ugliest, most naked, and distorted form. The scene begins with auditory torture. No background music, just the sound of cutlery hitting porcelain. Clink, clink. It sounds as piercing as fingernails on a chalkboard. Toni Collette sits there. Look closely at her facial muscles. She isn't just sitting still. Her jaw twitches. Her eyes dart around to avoid looking at her son. Her hands tremble as she lifts food to her mouth. It is the portrait of a ticking time bomb counting down. She is trying to swallow not just food, but the resentment rising in her throat. And when the silence breaks, the bomb explodes. Toni Collette's state transition here is phenomenal. From bitter sarcasm, sure, fine, she shifts to violent explosion in a split second. She slams the table. She stands up, and her face deforms. This is where physical acting reigns supreme. Her lips twist to one side, snot and tears flowing freely, veins in her neck bulging. She screams with the hoarse, broken voice of someone who has cried for days on end. The peak of suffocation is the line that chills the viewer's spine. I am your mother. Why is this line so terrifying? Because it isn't an assertion of authority. It is a desperate cry for help. She screams the title mother like a final shield to protect herself from the collapse of her sanity. She unloads all guilt, all hatred onto Peter, the son sitting frozen like a stone statue. Toni Collette perfectly portrayed the internal conflict. A mother who loves her son, yet wants to blame him for his sister's death. That conflict tears her apart, right in front of the audience's eyes. This scene has no ghosts, no gore, but it makes the audience feel suffocated because it is too real. We feel like intruders, peeking into the most private tragedy of a stranger's family. We want to look away because it is too cruel, too ugly. But Toni Collette's terrifying energy hypnotizes us, forcing us to stare straight into the abyss of depression. A masterclass performance proving that, in that house, the scariest thing isn't the demon Paimon, but the grief of a mother who has lost all hope. Leaving the heart-wrenching screams of Hereditary. In number 4, we arrive at a quieter space, but its weight is enough to crush any heart. The film is Interstellar. And the moment Matthew McConaughey faces the greatest enemy of his life, time. To feel this pain, remember its brutal context. Cooper has just returned from the tsunami planet. To him, he's been gone for only a few hours. But due to relativity and time dilation, on Earth, 23 years have passed. He walks into the control room, sits in the cold chair, and turns on the monitor. He expects to see his little children. But what hits him is an entire lifetime that has slipped away. This is the ultimate acting challenge called the reaction shot. Matthew McConaughey has no co-star, cannot move, and cannot speak. All he has are his facial muscles and his eyes. Watch every second pass on his face. It is a perfect map of emotion. When the first video pops up, his son has just graduated high school. Matthew smiles. A radiant, proud smile of a father. His eyes sparkle with happiness. But then, the next video, his son is married. The next video, he is a grandfather. Matthew's smile begins to distort. He realizes the horrifying truth. He missed everything. He missed graduation, the wedding, and the birth of his grandson. The psychological transition here is heartbreakingly smooth. From a smile to shock, eyebrows furrowing, breathing, becoming shallow and rapid. He covers his mouth with his hand as if trying to hold back a choking sob. And then, the gut punch. His son announces that his grandson has died, and Grandpa has passed away too. At this point, Matthew can no longer hold it back. He breaks down. Tears burst forth like a broken dam. He sobs uncontrollably, his body shaking in the cramped chair. It is the pain of absolute helplessness. But the peak of suffocation only comes with the final video. The screen goes dark, and Murph appears. No longer the angry little girl. Murph is now a grown woman, the exact same age Cooper was when he left. When Murph says, "Dad, it's me, Murph. Today is my birthday," Matthew McConaughey's eyes go dead. He remembers the promise he made. When you're my age, I'll be back. Today, that promise is broken. Murph turns off the screen in despair, leaving Cooper stranded alone in the vast universe. Matthew McConaughey portrayed an emotion more complex than sadness, regret. He didn't need to scream. He used silence and tears to tell us about the cruelty of the universe. He showed us that the cost of saving humanity was losing his own family. A performance that drained the audience's tears, proving that in space, no one can hear you scream, but everyone can feel your heart breaking. If the tears of Interstellar melted your heart, then at number 3, prepare for your blood to run cold. We descend into the dungeons of the Baltimore State Hospital to meet the greatest villain of all time, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Anthony Hopkins. With only 16 minutes of screen time in the entire film, he won an Oscar and has haunted the world for 3 decades. What was his secret? Not screaming, not wild movements. The secret lies in absolute stillness. Recall the moment Agent Clarice Starling walks down the dungeon corridor. Other prisoners scream, curse, and throw things. But when she reaches the final cell, Hannibal is standing there. He stands upright, motionless in the exact center of the room, like a wax figure awaiting a visitor. He doesn't look around. He looks straight at her. And straight at us. The most expensive detail, the thing that turned this role into a legend, was Anthony Hopkins' bold decision. He decided never to blink. He mimicked reptiles. He kept his eyes wide, unblinking, piercingly blue. Not blinking allowed him to maintain hypnotic control over his opponent. He didn't miss a single micro-expression of fear from his prey. When Hannibal speaks, it is a metallic sound, slippery and sharp as a scalpel. He doesn't attack Clarice with force. He attacks with insight. He sniffs the air. Sniff. Sniff. And identifies her cheap perfume, her poor background, her childhood traumas, just by looking at her shoes and her bag. Anthony Hopkins turned Hannibal into a sophisticated monster. He is polite, courteous, but that courtesy is merely a mask for a cruel intellect. He dissects Clarice's psyche layer by layer, making her feel naked, vulnerable, and completely dominated even though he is the one locked behind bulletproof glass. The scariest moment isn't when he kills, but when he smiles gently and talks about eating a census taker's liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Anthony Hopkins proved that. The most terrifying evil isn't the loud evil. It is the evil that sees right through your soul, understanding your fears better than you do yourself. A masterclass performance that makes us shudder to realize, sometimes the one in the cage is the one holding the key. Leaving Hannibal Lecter's prison, we step into a dilapidated gas station in the desolate Texas desert. At the runner-up spot, it is not a flesh-eating monster, but a ghost of death. Anton Chigurh. Javier Bardem created one of the most terrifying villains in cinema history without screaming, without chasing. He is terrifying because he is empty. Look at the gas station scene. This is the perfect definition of suspense. A mundane setting, a friendly old gas station attendant, and a stranger. But Javier Bardem turns that social conversation into a life-or-death gamble with just a few sentences. What suffocates the audience is how Anton Chigurh reacts to friendliness. When the old man asks, "Will it rain in Dallas?" Chigurh doesn't answer. He stares. He gets annoyed by the small talk. He twists every word, cornering the old man with a twisted, cold logic. Javier Bardem uses dead eyes masterfully. No anger, no pleasure. He looks at the attendant like an insect he is considering whether to crush. The silence between lines drags on. The crinkling of the candy wrapper. The rhythmic spinning of the ceiling fan. Everything creates an invisible pressure crushing the audience's chest. And then the coin appears. The iconic line rings out, soft but heavy as a mountain. Call it, the old man doesn't understand. Call it for what? Just call it. Why is this a masterclass? Because Javier Bardem elevated a game of chance into a philosophy of life and death. He explains the journey of the coin. It traveled 22 years, passed through millions of hands, only to end up here, on this counter, deciding a man's fate. To Chigurh, murder isn't personal. Murder is the randomness of the universe. He is merely the executioner. The horror of the scene lies in the fact that the victim and the audience doesn't know why they might be killed. We hold our breath waiting for the coin toss, hearts pounding with every second of silence. And when the old man guesses right, Chigurh shows no disappointment. He simply hands him the coin and walks away. That indifference is the most haunting part. Javier Bardem proved that. The scariest evil is the one without humanity, the one you cannot negotiate with, and it can strike at any moment, for a reason as random as heads or tails. And finally, number 1. The performance that completely redefined the concept of a villain in the 21st century. We are talking about the opening 20 minutes of Inglourious Bastards. And the monster disguised as a gentleman, Colonel Hans Landa. Christoph Waltz. An unknown name before this film stepped into the light and won an Oscar solely because of this classic opening scene. Why does it top the list? Because this is a masterclass in the art of psychological manipulation. The scene takes place at a peaceful French farmhouse. Hans Landa walks in. He doesn't bring a gun, he brings a smile. He asks for a glass of milk, compliments the farmer's daughters, and behaves as gently as a visiting uncle. But that very politeness is the most terrifying weapon of all. Watch how Christoph Waltz commands the space. He turns the Lapidite family's dining table into a courtroom, and he is the judge, jury, and executioner. He doesn't use violence to interrogate. He uses silence and roundabout questions. He forces the farmer, Perrier Lapidite, to participate in his cat-and-mouse game. The most exquisite detail is when Hans Landa pulls out his pipe. An oversized, ridiculous pipe like Sherlock Holmes. Why does he do that? To assert dominance. To show the farmer, I am the detective, I know everything, and you are just a small rat. Christoph Waltz portrays the character's sick pleasure in watching fear rise in his opponent's eyes. He savors every second of the hunt. The peak of genius is when he suggests switching the language from French to English. The audience initially thinks it's just politeness, but no, it is a brutal tactical move. He switches to English so that the Jewish people hiding under the floorboards cannot understand that their fate is being sealed. He cuts off the prey's information right before delivering the killing blow. The moment Hans Landa stops smiling, his face hardens, his eyes turn cold, and he utters the fateful line, "You are sheltering enemies of the state, are you not?" At that moment, the air in the theater is sucked out. The farmer crumbles, he weeps, he trembles, and he betrays the people he was protecting. Hans Landa didn't need to lay a finger on him. He broke the will of a tough man with just words. And the end of the scene. When he orders his soldiers to shred the floorboards, but let Shoshana escape, he walks to the door, raises his gun, but doesn't shoot. He smiles and shouts, "Au revoir, Shoshana." That is the moment we realize he didn't fail. He let her go. Because for the Jew hunter, the game is more fun when the prey runs, so he can hunt them all over again. Christoph Waltz created a villain we despise, yet cannot look away from because he is too charming, too intelligent, and too cruel. This is the absolute pinnacle of acting, the undisputed. Number 1. Our journey has traversed every spectrum of human emotion, from the insanity of Joker to the tears of regret in Interstellar, from the loud rage in Whiplash to the deadly silence of Hannibal Lecter and the fateful coin toss of Anton Chigurh. And finally, we ended with the terrifying politeness of Hans Landa. These 10 performances are not just acting techniques. These are 10 times actors drain their souls to leave eternal legacies for cinema. They prove that sometimes a glance, a frown, can have more explosive power than bombs. But surely, this list cannot satisfy everyone. In your opinion, who is worthy but was left out of today's top 10? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and we will discuss and build the list for the next part. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to Cameo Chronicles so you don't miss upcoming in-depth film analyses. Thank you for watching until the very last second. And now, cut. See you next time.